Hello and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian, and on today's episode, I figured we'd do something we haven't done in a hot minute on the channel, which is just brew a new deck. There's a lot of Final Fantasy commanders out right now, and to be honest, I've got the brewing bug, and I'm just really excited to make new decks. And this is one that's been sort of scratching at the back of my brain for basically the entire time Final Fantasy has been spoiled, which is Golbez Crystal Collector. So what we're going to do is I'm literally going to brew this deck up from scratch here in front of y'all. And yeah, we'll talk about some of the intricacies of brewing a new deck, all that kind of stuff. If I sound like I'm a little off this week, my inner lip has a really bad series of cuts on it, so unfortunately, the talking's a little hard. So we'll be doing our best here. But before we get into this, I want to remind you while you're here on YouTube, hit that like button, that subscribe button if you enjoy videos like this, or check out patreon.com/comedianmtg. I popped in there recently to thank my patrons, as well as mention that we're going to be trying to do some more YouTube shorts, basically after MagicCon. For the channel, and sort of chimed in to see what the patrons wanted to try and check out the shorts market as of right now. So going to be some cool stuff coming down the pipeline as far as that is concerned. Let's dive into Golbez. So Golbez has a few lines of text on it. It is a Dimir 1/4, and it says whenever an artifact you control enters, surveil 1. Now note that says whenever an artifact enters and not whenever you cast an artifact, right? So if you make something that makes multiple artifact bodies, yeah, that surveils that many times, right? Then the beginning of your end step, if you control 4 or more artifacts, return target creature from your graveyard to your hand. Then if you control 8 or more artifacts, each opponent loses life equal to that card's power. So kind of interesting stuff here. I mostly like Golbez for the whenever an artifact enters, surveil 1 line of text, and then the other stuff feels like it's just sort of incidentally good. Now, one of the things that those who have been paying attention to this channel for a long time know about me is that one of my favorite cards of all time is Bolas' Citadel, right? So I knew that this was a deck that I would have to at least tinker around with a little bit, because the idea of just playing a deck full of super cheap artifacts that you could then proceed to go, artifacts, and basically sculpt your perfect Bolas' Citadel seemed like exactly the kind of nonsense that I really enjoy playing. The second card in the sort of tipping over factor, because like there are other Citadel decks that exist that are more interesting, hypothetically speaking, right? But the other thing that sort of tipped me into the I want to explore this commander section was the printing of another brand new Final Fantasy legend, which is Matoya. So Matoya says whenever you scry or surveil, you draw a card. So now all of a sudden, whenever you have an artifact enter, you're each getting individual Golbez triggers, right? So that means for every single artifact that enters your battlefield, you are surveilling 1, drawing a card, surveilling 1, drawing a card, surveilling 1, drawing a card. And being in Dimir, being in blue-black, it is really easy to tutor Matoya out onto the battlefield. And so the combination thereof, I was like, absolutely, let's go mess around with this combination, because this seems super sick. I can especially imagine a lot of scenarios where basically you have Golbez out, you go play Matoya, and then you just drop like a bunch of 0-mana rocks in a row, and boom, all of a sudden you're off to the races. So this seemed pretty sweet. Yeah, let's jump into it. So whenever I start the cEDH deck, I'll put in some amount of placeholder lands, right? Just to remind myself as I'm deck building, with that little number that you see down at the bottom of your screen over here in the lovely Moxfield, which is I want to shout out Moxfield, amazing sponsor, as well as a fantastic deck building site that I've been using basically as long as I've been playing cEDH. So Moxfield, super sick. But anyways, while we're looking here at Moxfield, I always want to add, I start with 28 lands. I have a feeling this deck being full of basically effectively free artifacts and a bunch of cheap low to the ground artifacts, I'm assuming we'll probably get down to like 25, 26 lands for this deck because of how much we'll probably be able to like sculpt with our commander. But that being said, we want to start out with getting that foundation of lands at least padded for the time being, so we at least have a rough idea of how many lands we want to play. And then from there, for anyone who's seen me do these type of builds before, you also recognize the fact that I will go in and mess with the land base last, because especially like if we have, for example, we go to build this deck and it's like 100 black pips and like 2 blue pips, we're really not going to build a mana base that's perfectly balanced on blue and black, right? Not that I really see that being a problem with this deck, but you never know. Next thing I want to throw out is the fast mana, right? The things that make the deck work. These are sort of the basics of fast mana that you have in every single deck. They're the ones that are going to show up every single time. Now, the interaction package, I think a lot of people would instinctively go, isn't interaction next, right? And before we even actually go into that, I think I feel like I jumped off the topic quickly. I think whenever you're working on a cEDH deck, one of the first things I put in is the things I'm expecting to win the game with, right? So for me, there's a couple win cons that are semi-obvious, right? So we have our Thassa's Oracle, right? We want to get our Thassa's Oracle and our Demonic Consultation in the list, as well as our Tainted Pact, right? The most classic Dimir win con in the format as of this point, right? Just exiling your whole library, doing the thing, right? Also, we are going to be a Turbo Bolus Citadel deck, meaning there is not more logical of a choice to play next than the actual things that win with Bolus Citadel. So that would be Sensei's Divining Top and Aetherflux Reservoir. Many people know, basically the TLDR of this whole combination here is that if you have Citadel out, you can basically redraw cards off the top of your library with Sensei's over and over again. And normally you'd be losing 1 life for every iteration, but with Aetherflux Reservoir, you're able to gain progressively more and more life as you go through your turn, and you're able to shoot your opponents down with the Reservoir. Now, there are potentials here for like doing stuff with Golbez and infinitely bouncing artifacts back and forth, right? I think most people default to like a Hullbreaker horror type situation where you have Hullbreaker come in and bounce a bunch of rocks or a bunch of zeros back and forth, and you can like infinitely surveil your deck that way. And I think it's an option I'm going to add without really knowing what exactly I'm going to invest into for the what do you do when you surveil your whole library payoff, right? Obviously, Golbez allows you to pick up a creature and then dome everybody for a bunch of life, but that's not really going to be a win condition, I'm hoping. Like, you can always go deep on this deck and play Scion of Draco, right? Like, you can definitely play this card or some other ridiculous piece in it, right? But, like, I don't think that's necessarily what we are trying to do. What is a dome based off mana value? That card's power. Oh, it goes off power anyway, so that wouldn't even work, right? So we need a card with a ridiculous amount of power. This could be my excuse to sneak an Emrakul into this deck and, like, who am I to say no to one of my favorite cards of all time, right? Very clearly, I'm assuming if you're looking at this curve here, you're safe to assume that I won't be on an ad nause in this deck. It's also safe to assume that like you can easily run a version of this deck that is very ad nause friendly, right? I tend to like the Dimir Bolus Citadel stuff that doesn't do the ad nause thing, because I think ad nause is much worse in non-red, basically. Like, not having access to breach makes ad nause a lot harder. I think you could do it here, as I mentioned, but I do kind of like the idea of relying on Golbez a little bit. The Emrakul will be in the sideboard, but I have a feeling, knowing myself, I'm probably going to get back on it because I love that card. Worth noting too, right? Golbez does not give you card advantage until you have Matoya, right? It just gives you really good card selection from the top of your library, right? So that's something I'm going to be keeping in the back of my mind quite a lot with this deck. It's also the reason that I'm really considering the reality chip, right? Which is basically saying I don't want only my Bolus Citadel to be the only things going and playing stuff off the top of my library. I want to be able to have the reality chip as well. For those who don't know, it's an equipment. Basically, it's a feature side effect. You may look at the top card of your library at any time for the normal version, and then you can reconfigure the reality chip, basically equipping it to a creature. And then as long as it is attached to a creature, you can play lands and cast spells from the top of your library. So if our deck is full of a bunch of hyper efficient, low mana value pieces, or pieces that we can put in the graveyard for value later on, we want to be able to have access to something that allows us to just play more and more and more and more and more stuff from the top of our library. I don't know if we're going to go as deep as, what is the name of that card? Mystic Forge, I believe it is. Yeah, Mystic Forge. But it's definitely a consideration, right? So I'll put that in as well. For those who've never seen Mystic Forge, a very, very silly little artifact that says you can look at the top part of your library, you can cast artifacts and colorless spells from the top of your library. So if our deck gets just so full of all of these artifacts, yeah, we definitely go into this card, right? Let's get some of the tutors in here, right? Some of the auto include tutors. That's definitely going to be the black tutors, right? We want vampiric tutor for sure. We want demonic tutor, absolutely. I have a feeling that we're gonna get enough bodies for a diabolic intent. My theory for that is basically, I love the idea of potentially playing a bunch of the stuff like the 0 mana artifact creatures for sack fodder, right? So thinking things like your Memnites, your Phyrexian Walkers, right? And your Ornithopters specifically. I guess you could go as deep as Shield Sphere as well, but that's, this is a decide how many you want later. And while we're looking at the first pass of the deck, we'll just keep putting stuff in and then take it out as we go through. But it is nice because these effects, as I mentioned, can sack Diabolic Intent. They can sack to Culling the Weak, right? And especially if we're playing, a Bolus Citadel strategy, the idea of having access to 4 black mana very quickly is very solid. Without deviating too much from tutors, let's just make sure we have our Imperial Seal in there as well. Many people might be noticing that I'm not mentioning Mystical Tutor because I don't think having Demonic Consultation and Tainted Pact is enough of a reason to go, oh yeah, that's definitely an include for Mystical Tutor. Now, we may want to take a page from Vintage and run a paradoxical outcome in this deck, right? This one I'll look up for folks who are not Vintage familiar, but basically you bounce any number of non-land, non-tokens that you would control back to your hand, and you draw a card for each one this way. This does seem like this is probably going to be like a perfect deck for a card like this. It's almost like we're playing Dimir Joyra in a sense, and especially with the Golbez plus Matoya synergy, it kind of feels like Dimir build your own Joyra, right? Yeah, it's a little bit interesting in that capacity, right? Back to tutors. So, that being said, Mystical Tutor, I'm at least putting in the sideboard for the time being because, being able to potentially go and grab a paradoxical outcome, which is probably going to be close to a win condition in this deck, is pretty interesting too, right? I think this is a great Beseech the Mirror deck. Beseech the Mirror just asks that you have a spare artifact or enchantment or token, which I think will have some spare artifacts, I'm guessing, through the course of this deck, right? And then I think any other tutors come with a bit of an asterisk attached to them, right? So I don't want to go too deep into those. One card I think we should mention right away, we care about our graveyard. We are literally filling our graveyard with our commander at all times, meaning we don't want to lose access to those things forever, right? So my instinct is immediately to go to Yawgmoth's Will, right? One of the best, before Underworld Breach came out, this was the best graveyard recursion piece of all time. And so, especially having played a lot of Glarb, it's almost similar in these aspects. And so definitely down to Yawg's Will in this deck because it's one of the best cards in Glarb. So, Bolsa Citadel, important card in the deck. Card you probably want to tutor for every once in a while. Let's get some tutors for that card in this deck. I think Transmute Artifact is probably the best one, which allows you to sack an artifact to go tutor up an artifact. Honestly, I was just mentioning this, but I don't know that there's a lot of other ones that I want to snap include, right? There's always the option for things like War of Invention or Reshape or stuff like that. And they're all super solid cards, but I think maybe I want to give them a little breathing room, especially because when you have black, it's almost always easier to default to, well, why wouldn't I just go use a non-specific tutor, right? One that's not going to require certain things to work. One of the angles to potentially take with this deck, because you are surveilling so much, is Reanimator, right? That's one to consider a lot, especially if we're thinking about a card like Hullbreaker Horror, right? Playing a bunch of reanimation effects kind of makes a lot of sense, right? So if that's the case, what would we consider there, right? Things like Razaketh come into mind a lot, right? Razaketh is a great reanimation engine, especially if we're playing all these little dinky artifact creatures. It's a fantastic way to basically convert that to a win. I'll throw these. I'll go over here in the sideboard while that's happening. Razaketh right there on your screen. We would also potentially think of Hoarding Broodlord, right? These are kind of the big, if I am reanimating stuff in these colors, these are the big payoffs. You can think about other stuff like Void Winnower and Gataxius, but we also saw how that worked in Hashton and didn't really pay off too well. But at least a Consecrated Sphinx is another one, at least worth having a conversation about. And I guess Toxrill, but sure, I guess. I'll put it in there just so we can stare at Gary the Snail. Back to the artifacts. Let's get a few more of the ones that are definitely going in there. We have a 2-mana commander. Mox Amber is going in this deck so fast, it's crazy. This is a deck that's going to want a lot of fast mana, fast acceleration, fast artifacts. So Grim Monolith makes a lot of sense here. I think we're going to, before I forget, actually, let's do our card draw. This reminded me, the One Ring. Obviously an amazing card draw engine, and then we'll put our Ristics and our Mystics in here. Okay, back to the artifact package. We're looking at Mox Opal, probably pretty obviously. Mox Opal is one of the best artifacts of all time, but just needs a certain amount of build around. And trust me, we're already looking at 16 artifacts. There's going to be more. 17, actually. Yeah. One that I've been liking a lot lately is actually Imposter Mech. I like Imposter Mech because it does win the Orcish Bowmasters fights. For those unfamiliar what I mean by that, Imposter Mech becomes a vehicle clone of something. So if you were to copy a Bowmasters of your opponents, if for some reason that's a card that's being very active and aggressive in the pod, Imposter Mech allows you to make a copy of Bowmasters that isn't a creature, and therefore it can't lose to other people having a Bowmaster enter and pinging it unless you crew it, which would be very strange. What's this? Me holding a deck box that I'm going to use at my next tournament, and it happens to be heavy play? Well, yes, that makes a lot of sense because I use heavy play all the time. These heavy play products are amazing. As I say every time I talk about heavy play, they do not pay me to go out there and use their products at events, but I do all the time because I genuinely love this product. These things are so solid. That's a safer version if that first one doesn't get through. But yeah, I love using heavy play products. They have amazing deck boxes. I always have my little dice tray attached as well where I keep my dice. I pop it open now, but I don't want my dice exploding everywhere in the middle of this recording. If you use code comedian on your order, you get 10% off. Heavy play products are awesome. I will happily continue using them all the time because they are a high quality product. The magnetic lock system is legitimately the most convenient system I have ever used for any product. And I am super, super excited to continue using their product because it's awesome. Once again, use code comedian at checkout to get 10% off your order. Some other generically powerful artifacts. We're looking at like an arcane signet. I feel like makes a lot of sense in this deck. The other question is like whether you go for like a Felwar Stone or a Talisman of Dominance. And I think the Talisman is the safe option just because of the few times that the Felwar Stone would not actually be online when you need it to be online. I also want to do a little look here of like, see if there's ever like a whenever you surveil and see if that's some sort of payoff here. Cards like Matoya, basically. Mirko is kind of cute if you go down the Reanimator line. Basically, whenever you surveil, put a counter on it, and then at the beginning of your upkeep, or your end step, you're going to return a creature power less than its power from the graveyard to the battlefield, which is kind of cute. Probably not good enough, but cute. Well, that part didn't really yield anything too interesting, but there's some cute stuff there at the very least. Speaking of useful artifacts, we definitely want to look into our Wish Claw Talisman. Very, very powerful artifact here. And I have a feeling we're going to be doing a lot of artifact acceleration, so I think a Manifold Key ends up being pretty interesting here. You know, worst case scenario, it's untap of your Soul Ring or something like that, right? But worst case scenario in this deck, it's just a Surveil on the pretty cheap. I have a feeling because of all of the artifacts that we're casting, we're going to want some sort of card velocity. So Ethereum Sculptor is a card I think I like a lot here. It's a cheap 2-drop. It's a nice body. It's an artifact itself. So when it enters, Golbez surveils, and at the same time, it's reducing the cost of all of your artifacts. I think it's probably just a slam dunk in this deck. While I was looking to find this card again, I also stumbled upon Ether Vial, which I think is kind of cute in the deck. And here's why. Because one of the synergies that you can do with this deck is when you set up that infinite surveil loop, right? You can put, if you have an Aether Vial on 2, basically, and you find a way to go down further into your library, you can use Golbez's trigger to bring your Thassa's Oracle back from your graveyard, and then you can use Aether Vial to potentially sneak it into play. So I think that's kind of an interesting little setup there. Not sure if it's going to be worth it at the end of the day, but it's kind of fun. I think we added Culling the Weak earlier and then didn't add Dark Ritual and Cabal Ritual. These cards are obviously going to be slam dunks in a deck like this. Also, fun fact, there is someone else who performed with this deck. They got 19th in a 60-person tournament this last weekend, so I figured we'd take a little look. I was checking EDH Top 16, and there's one person who's played it at all since Final Fantasy's been released. So I said, hey, might as well take a peek at what they did and do a little comparison here, which is one of my favorite features here in Moxfield. Did a little compare, see what the similarities and differences, or see if there's any spicy tech that we maybe didn't see in the list. And yeah, obviously, like we don't have counter spells in the deck yet. We don't have, some of these bauble style cards, which are probably obviously going to be in the deck. A Forensic Edge here is a really interesting one. We'll throw that in the sideboard. Makes an artifact, makes a basically 1 mana crackable clue every time you cast an artifact, which hopefully, actually, we can just add it. We're going to be doing that for sure. Some of these flash effects makes a lot of sense, giving artifacts flash. Crystal Skull was another one I was considering, which is really cool because it allows you to play historic spells up top. Oh, is this actually just better than the Mystic Forge? It might be. That might be, actually. I'll put it on the sideboard for the time being. Jeweled Amulet. Oh my goodness, how could I forget one of my favorites? Got to put that one in. Flood Caller is a card that we're going to talk about later. Basically does the same thing as the Hullbreaker does in the deck, but also gives your artifacts flash. I don't think we're going to be winning at flash speed a whole lot in this deck, but it is worth considering. Then a bunch of interaction. Enhanced Surveillance is kind of funny. You can look at an additional 2 cards every time you surveil. I guess the wording on that makes sense why it didn't show up in our last little look through. Look at an additional 2 cards. Is that worth it? Is Surveil 3 every time an artifact enters is a lot of card selection, right? Like it's a very quick, it's not drawing it though. I don't know that for 2 mana that's worth it, but it is fun. It's to say the least, it is fun. Oh, if we could have the density to play Thought Monitor, that'd be so cool. I played Affinity in Modern, and like this is very much a classic Affinity card for to say the least. It's pretty sick to see. Yeah, so let's get the Crystal Skull in there. I really like that. Plus, it's something that you can grab off of Beseech the Mirror, which is pretty sick. Forensic Cheers in the list already. Ether Vial. I don't know if I've sold myself on Ether Vial. It's like kind of close though. It's really interesting card to say the least. I haven't put in Bowmasters yet because I don't know that we need Bowmasters per se, because we don't like, I don't think we're wheeling a lot as a deck, right? It'll be good to not get blown up by a paradoxical outcome, but I'd rather just clone someone else's Bowmasters in 99% of circumstances in a deck like this. I think also Phyrexian Metamorph is worth adding in, not only for that reason, but also just artifact clone that we can copy more artifacts, copy our own stuff, all the good stuff. Some people might note that Gadgeteer is here, and Gadgeteer does go infinite with Basalt Monolith because it reduces the untap ability on Basalt Monolith, much like you would see on Azurda or a Kinnan. The issue I tend to have with it is that like we can make colorless mana infinitely here, and that's cool, but that doesn't do anything, right? Like you can have infinite colorless mana, right? Like that's all it does. So like for me in the time being, I think that'll probably stay out for now. Let's look at and see if there's any other benefits that are kind of like Joyra, like whenever artifact and draw. I think that's a really good selection of keywords here to look for. Riddlesmith is kind of interesting. Whenever an artifact is cast, you may draw a card, and if you do, discard a card. That's like close to what we're looking for here, right? I think it's very, very in that same vein. So we'll at least put it in the sideboard here. Seeing Psymaster Thopterus is kind of interesting. I don't necessarily know that we want it, but it also reminds me that I'm probably going to add an Urza into the deck. Yeah, super sick. Ooh, Vexing Bauble is kind of interesting. We have a lot of zeros. Probably not going to play Bauble, but really good to protect certain win conditions too. So we'll sideboard that a little bit. Okay, nothing super productive here, but let me add that Urza in because I absolutely think it's a slam dunk in this deck. Basically, we're going to have a bunch of little junky little guys on the battlefield, and being able to tap them for mana is pretty sick. Now this one I will change the printing of because I did actually rip a Terra Urza, and so that'll definitely be the one I feature here. All right, and as much as I love the idea of us playing a deck with no interaction, let's at least play the ones that we definitely want to be on, right? For me, that's Flusterstorm. We have a 2-mana commander, so Fierce Guardianship, 100%. You could argue for Deadly Rollick. I don't love Deadly Rollick a lot of the times. Like I usually find that if I need removal, I don't have my commander out. Is sort of been a historic pattern for me. So there are other cards that I want to consider too, right? Things like Fatal Push and stuff like that. I'm not sure if this is going to be the right deck for that, but I'm going to put it in for the time being. I traditionally tend to like Dismember, Fatal Push, stuff like that for when I'm in blue and black. Or honestly, maybe I should just be on Pongify. Yeah, that's actually making a little more sense because I was thinking too hard on the black part and not the blue part necessarily as much. Speaking of those types of cards, we want low to the ground things. So Chain of Vapor is going to do double duty here because Chain of Vapor can be a bounce spell to stop our opponent's stuff, but it also can be a bounce spell to put mana rocks back into our hand and stuff like that. Probably going to want a Cyclonic Rift just because I think we kind of need one to be, well, that's a maybe, because we're going to be playing a lot of things like this that bounce our own artifacts back too. So maybe we'll be okay with not playing Cyc Rift. We'll see. In the meantime, I'm going to play one of my favorites, as many people know, Displacement Wave, just to pick up all the rocks or to fully get a whole board wipe going. This one's I think an underplayed piece just in general, and also like when you have a commander out, you can just like X = 0, put all those zeros back in your hand and kind of go again, which is pretty sick. I don't know that we're gonna actually have enough blue cards for this to be a good Force of Will deck. We're already actually up there, so I was a little worried about that, I'm not gonna lie. So we'll definitely be on Force of Will. Force of Negation's probably one we're gonna put in the sideboard. Mindbreak Trap's another one. I don't know if we're gonna want a Mindbreak Trap in this deck. Not that Mindbreak Trap isn't good, it's just the fact that Mindbreak Trap is expensive and it's not defensive, right? So that one's going to be a sideboard for the time being. We definitely want a Pact of Negation, right? Classic free counterspell. In a deck like this, you really actually do want an offer you can't refuse, because you want to be able to counter your own stuff. Because sometimes you might need to, first of all, it makes 2 treasures, which is then 2 surveils with your commander, right? Little funny stuff like that, right? I also kind of like the idea. I don't know. We might play Drift of Phantasm in the deck just to be able to go grab Matoya, to be honest, because Matoya is going to be such a good engine in this deck. That's what I'll put in the sideboard here. Obviously not interaction, but worth considering of the same. Pact, Mental Missteps, the other one. And then Swan Song is the last one I use to round out this suite. Any other counter spells we'd be considering would be more conditional. I'm also going to potentially move Pongify out, because the more I think about Pongify, I think I just want it to be a resculpt. Yes, it's 1 more mana, but Resculpt also handles Grafdigger's Cage, which is going to be something that's going to be very detrimental to us being able to win, especially if we're playing a bunch of cards off the top of our library over and over again, right? It's going to be really sketchy for us to try and win through Grafdiggers, so it'd be tough. Are we a Displacer Kitten deck is a really good question here. I think we have enough, like, when you're casting your stuff over and over again. Oh, and Displacer Kitten also triggers our commander, which is kind of interesting because you flicker the things that enter the battlefield, which then triggers your Golbez. So I kind of like Displacer Kitten here. Yeah, so Displacer is going to make the cut for sure. And then one card I haven't put in that I think is just a slam dunk for this deck is Prize Statue, which is a silly little artifact, but when it enters or is put in the graveyard, it makes 2 treasures. And so I love the idea here that we can potentially end up in a scenario where we are just putting a bunch of treasures on. And it makes 2 bodies, so it's a double surveil. I think it just feels kind of like a slam dunk in here for sure. We're at the point now where I'm kind of interested to see what happens. Obviously, EDH Top 16 doesn't have a lot of results for this commander, but I want to see over here in the EDHRECs tab, which is, it goes to EDHREC, sees similar decks, and it'll offer some suggestions. It might be things that are pretty obvious that we're just not thinking of. I love using this tab. Honestly, when you make as many decks as I do, sometimes you miss the things that you know are good cards. You just didn't really think of it at the time. There's a bunch of lands that are probably going to pop up. Yeah, I saw that right away. Because obviously we have a bunch of islands in the deck right now. Born's one for the considering as well. We've already put Flood Caller in the sideboard here. Mostly lands. Or, Opposition Agent is a great card. Doesn't mean we have to like turbo it into the deck. These 2 lands were obviously going to always make the cut, I think, in this deck, because artifact lands that enter and give you surveils are great. Necro's been one we have to consider really heavily. The only problem with Necro in this deck that I'm seeing as of right now is the fact that, like, you don't really have a great Necro line in your end step. You really don't like flash a bunch of stuff in that wouldn't be like a Citadel style thing. So I'm a little skeptical of Necropotence. Reanimate seems like just a solid value include when you're dumping half of your deck in your graveyard. Lion's Eye Diamond helps with the proactive plan, but it's a little weird because we're not really going that kind of turbo deck, right? It's not bad. I think it's probably worth including if I had to like put money on it, but it's a little sketchy either way. If you do go more graveyard, obviously Entomb's worth considering as well. Yeah, Dramatic Reversal is kind of interesting because it like untaps. I mean, if you have a bunch of artifacts in the battlefield, I just don't know how much we're going to be tapping for them if we don't have something like Urza, right? We will have a lot of mana rocks, so that's one I'll put in the considering board too. Limb Duel's Vault is basically just what our commander does, so I don't think we really need that. I like Emery. It's a way to recur artifacts that we are dumping into the graveyard for sure. I think I might just add that right to the main deck. Praetor's Grasp is one I'm going to talk about in a minute. And Adnaz, we had talked about why I don't want to play Adnaz, but it's still a very good card, obviously. Darksteel, yeah, sure, we're going to add that just because it's an artifact land as well as the seat and the cards like that. I was going to wait on those, but heck with it. I'll just put them in now. Probably doesn't hurt to have a defense grid in the deck. It's probably our best way of making sure our win conditions stick through. And also, it's something artifact. Fair Mastermind's not bad at like maintaining card advantage. It's okay. I'll consider it. Golbez being a 2-drop means that Springleaf Drum's a pretty good 1-drop and probably will get refunded 99% of the time. So that's definitely going to go in the main deck. Mockingbird's okay. Yeah, I'm good on Brainstorm. The Mishra's Bauble is always going to be one, I think, that made the final cut. Here comes Thought Monitor again to remind me. I did like the idea of Mnemonic Betrayal as a backup win con. I don't know necessarily that this deck's going to be great with it because it's not like we play Brain Freeze in the main deck, right? So this one will be a considerable pick, but I like usually having some sort of way to force my opponents to mill before I really like having Mnemonic Betrayal in the deck. Myriad Besiege is interesting. Whenever you cast an artifact, make a 1/1. Okay, sure. So basically now everything surveils one on top. So it's like Master Thopterist already, right? And then at the beginning of your end step, draw a card and discard a card. And then if there are 15 more artifacts in your graveyard, target opponent loses the game. LOL. That's really funny. I think this is so bad though, right? Like the odds of this actually working are really bad. I'm going to put this on the sideboard because that's a very funny meme. And if you make it work in this deck, all the power to you. Flood Mob was one I was considering when I was looking at Chain of Vapor. I like Chain of Vapor better, but this is very good. Treasure Vault, yeah, Artifact Land, something. I'll put that in the sideboard. Thoughtcast is probably going to be a 1-mana draw too. I don't know if that's good enough in cEDH, to be honest, but it's cute. We'll put that in the considering. We already talked about Helix stuff. Muddle's interesting. I don't think I have a 2-drop that I care about like that. Yeah, I'm good on Muddle. Good on Spellskite. Spellskite's a great card. I just don't think this is the deck for it, but I'll put in the considering. Adventure Fair is cute, but we have black tutors. We don't really need to be using our lands as tutors. And then Urza's Bauble's probably one I'll add too. What's this? You're about to head to MagicCon Vegas and or another large event, and you would like to order some amazing singles, but you're not sure they're going to get there in time for that event. Well, head out to toamagic.com where they have amazingly fast shipping, and they also have options for you to pick up at events. That's right. Toa Magic is at so many major events. You can check out their website at toamagic.com and use code comedian at 5% off your order. And you can get some amazing singles for your cEDH exploits. Toamagic.com is an amazing resource, and it's a great place to pick up singles. Their booths are awesome. They have such an insane selection, which is so good for cEDH players because boy, do we pick the weirdest cards to fall over. So yeah, check out Toamagic.com. Use code comedian for 5% off your order. Now, we are at 31 lands. Realistically, I'm going to say that this deck can get away with 26, and I'm going to not be surprised if we can go all the way down to like 24 or 25 because of the amount of 0-drops we're playing in this list. It's just like, it's kind of ridiculous at how few lands we're probably going to need. Obviously, the more artifact lands we can play, the more it's going to be like semi better, right? And the lower land count is also, actually thinking about this even more, between Reality Chip and Crystal Skull and Bolus of Citadel, we really, really, really don't want to be hitting multiple lands. I'm aware that's what the Surveil is going to help with, but I think we're in a situation here where we can kind of be greedy and go down to 25, especially because every artifact we play is then more potential sculpting of our top deck. So, if that goes bad, then we're in trouble. I did convince myself on Sai when I was looking at those other cards, and also on the Riddlesmith here. Sai is really, really interesting because, as I mentioned, our commander cares about artifacts entering the battlefield, meaning we get an extra surveil on every single artifact we cast because Sai will make a body. It will then get made by Golbez and go from there. I don't know if we... Oh, that's kind of interesting. So you can, in this deck, what is the name of this stupid card? The Automaton from the Ether Drift Commander set. That's like the Marnius players like a lot. Yeah, so Stride Hanger Automaton. Thopters get +1/+1. If one or more artifact tokens we create in your control, that many plus an additional are made. So that, I'm going to sideboard this because that goes not infinite, but like semi-infinite with Warren Soul Trader, right? Which basically allows you to make a loop where as long as you can sacrifice one thing, you make Thopters equal to your, you make treasures equal to your life total, right? Because you can pay 1 life, sack the new Thopter, makes the Thopter that comes in. So essentially with your commander in this situation, because it says, it doesn't say 1 or more too, right? I put that in the main deck, but I meant to put it in the sideboard. But it would basically be like you make a mana and surveil 2 for every life that you put into it, which is kind of fascinating. I don't know if that's good. It's interesting. I don't know if it's good though. Like, is surveil 2 and 1 mana worth 1 life that you had to put together from a 2-card combo? I don't know. I'll leave that in the comments below whether you think that's a combo that's worth exploring in this deck. It's fascinating to say the least. How can we forget one of the most obvious includes in this deck? Malevolent Hermit. Oh my goodness. That's fantastic. And I can't even spell. Yeah, Malevolent Hermit's awesome. So while we're surveilling through our deck, we get to just put Malevolent Hermit in our graveyard and cast its backside, the Benevolent Geist, which allows you for 3 mana. The disturb cost allows you to have a 2/2 that says all your non-creatures cannot be countered. This card is fantastic for a deck like this, and you don't have to worry about drawing it because you can just pitch it away. It's great. I love it. As I mentioned before, I like the displacement wave effect. I like the problem with certain effects like these, like displacement wave or paradoxical outcome. These ones, the nice part about these is that you don't have to return everything, right? And so I think people are probably going to ask about things like filter out, right? Which is obviously a very powerful card, return all non-creature, non-land permanents to their owner's hand, right? And don't get me wrong, when you're looking at 2 Ristics or a Mystic or all those types of cards, this card is going to feel really, really good, right? But at the same time, I'm worried about the situations where it's like, well, we have a bolus of Citadel, and now we have to pick up our own Citadel and completely reset ourselves for the turn cycle, or a Crystal Skull or something like that. So I'm a little nervous about a card like Filter Out. The more I think about the deck, the more I think we want Tezzeret. Tezzeret will allow us to either it doesn't grab our bolus of Citadel, which is obviously like the worst part of it. But the better parts are that it can grab our things like our One Ring, or it can grab our Crystal Skull effects, right? The things that are going to allow us to grab these pieces that allow us to start manipulating top deck, or grab our Reservoir, which is also considerably powerful, right? So we're definitely down for that. Something that I didn't mention earlier that people might bring up is like the Necropotence interaction with Bowls of Citadel. Obviously, it's very powerful, but like our commander is kind of supposed to do that. So I'm kind of hoping that we don't need to go that deep with it. One card that I think would be kind of funny in this deck that I'm probably not going to play, but that I could see someone playing in at some point is I'm probably not going to play it in this deck, but I like Genesis Chamber. It's very funny in this deck. So whenever a non-token creature enters, if Genesis Chamber is untapped, the creature's controller makes a 1/1. Now, if you notice, this is everybody, so that's why it's bad. And like, you don't want to give the guys Cradle's decks a bunch of 1/1s. But it is kind of funny that anytime a creature would come in, you would be able to get one here. We're not going to do it, but I thought it'd be kind of comedic to mention. I'll put it in the sideboard or considering either way. I think it's also worth considering that like there may be a world in which you play some Krark Clan Ironworks loops in this deck, because they are pretty effective with this deck, right? So for those who aren't familiar, KCI is this thing that allows you to sack to make 2 generic mana, right? Or 2 colorless mana, I should say. And there's a lot of like combos you can go in and do with it, right? The name one being, if you have cards like Scrap Trawler and things that like artifacts that like pick up artifacts when they die, basically, you can create loops with Krark-Clan Ironworks that allow you to like recur them over and over and over and over and over again. The problem is they require a lot of pieces to set up, right? And so I'm not super ambitious as far as like expecting them to work too well, TBH. So as much as I like the idea of going through and doing like a whole sacrifice shenanigans thing, I think that is a way you can build the deck, right? So it'd be Scrap Trawler, it'd be things like Mer Retriever. Just as whenever it dies, you put an artifact from your graveyard to your hand, right? Mer Retriever, Junk Diver, which is just a more expensive Mer Retriever, right? The thing is, you need so many pieces for it to go right is my big issue. And so I'm having a lot of trouble like really taking that line too seriously. It's cool. It's one of my favorite like fringe archetypes of like KCI stuff, right? You also get to play like Moon Silver Key if you're doing stuff like that, right? Although Moon Silver Key just might be worth considering in this deck because it looks for an artifact card with a mana ability. I don't know that we necessarily need it, right? But if you do that, then that allows you to go grab our Crystal Skull, which is kind of funny because it's a feature site with a mana ability stapled onto it. And then in that version, Ashnod's Altar would also be a card you would put in it. Although it's like way less effective than the KCI itself. It's also worth considering like there's a whole like grinding station version of this deck, I'm assuming, but that's not the deck that we're currently building for this deck tech, I think. All right, I'm putting the Emrakul in for me. I've decided 13 damage to all your opponents. Well, actually, your opponent's losing 13 life is pretty solid. Plus, get some cool stuff. Okay, one thing I did want to mention. I did mention the grinding station a second ago. One of the reasons I was heavily considering grinding station is like grinding station already works to like give you random benefits for random sacrifices throughout the decks, right? But one thing grinding station also does is it allows you to play Praetor's Grasp to go take someone else's Underworld Breach. and then you can do a grinding station underworld breach line, which is kind of funny. Is it probably bad? Yeah. Is it really funny though? Absolutely. And yeah, probably not worth it, as I mentioned, but it's cool. It's a very cool thing you can do. I will say grinding station does also give you more, like, when you have your looking at the top of your library effects, your Balls of Citadel, your Crystal Skull, all those things. Grinding Station is another way to potentially clear the top of your library, which is not trivial, not worth not considering, right? Speaking of cards like that, I like Codex Shredder here. Which I think has not been played in 7,000 years, but it just taps to make target player mill a card. One, it basically shuts off all top deck tutors for the rest of the game, right? Your opponent goes to Imperial Seal or Vampiric Tutor or whatever it might be. You just get to shred them, right? The other thing is that Shredder has this other ability here for desperation times, because I don't know that we're going to play like a Time Twister effect, right? We might play Echo Vions or Time Twister, but like if something happens to our Yawgmoth's Will, or if we need to just grab something from the graveyard without Grafdigger's Cage coming into play, right? Codex Shredder's desperation mode here of 5 mana, return an artifact is like worth considering for sure, So actually, let's just be safe and main deck it. It's also an outlet for Hullbreaker Horror, because you can bounce it over and over again and mill your opponents one card at a time, which is kind of cute. I think I don't know. Eliza Diamond keeps perplexing me about whether it's good enough. Reanimate, I think I really want to test in the deck. With the synergy with Golbez that I mentioned earlier, where like we actually can start picking up stuff out of our graveyard with this commander and then flashing it in with Ether Vial, I think I'm going to give the card a try. Ether Vial is one of those cards that's like really great in the early game and like really, really bad if you draw it later. But I think it's cute enough where I'm going to give it a shot. And then worst case scenario, the card is bad and we learned a lesson. A part of me did kind of sell myself on that on that Praetor's Grasp line, which it might just be so bad. It might be super cope, but like it's pretty funny. I'm not going to lie. So I do kind of like the idea of potentially considering that. I don't know if that's me going way too deep in the sauce, but as I said, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I guess we have to decide now whether we're on the flash effects. I think it's probably worth it to look at Flood Caller. I don't think we're going to play Flood Caller combos, right? I don't think we're going to play the Retraction Helix stuff, things like that. But I think we can play at least Born Upon a Wind. I think that's my safe choice here. Is we're going to at least play Born Upon a Wind, and then maybe consider Valley Flood Caller as we continue working on the deck. Like if we just want that one extra slot. I just feel like there's other cards that are probably going to feel better in that position. Going for another advanced search here, let's just see if there's any artifacts I'm not thinking about that might fit in perfectly here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look up artifacts. And then we're going to look by basically popularity is the EDHREC rank, and just see if there's anything we're missing that should be in this deck. I think I have the Bauble in here. Let me double check. I think I have both Baubles in here, but those are obviously like nice cheap artifacts. Yeah, we have Urza's Bauble and Mishra's Bauble in the deck already. Perfect. Okay, so popular artifacts. We don't want the Greaves or anything like that. The Thought Vessels. Yeah, I'll like the classic staples. We're not a Skull Clamp deck, as cute as that is. I think if we're on the Sacrifice version of this deck, we are definitely a Skull Clamp deck. So let me at least put that in the sideboard. Everflowing Chalice is a consideration. It's a nice cheap artifact. This is kind of funny. Panharmonicon will double any artifacts entering and triggering your commander, but it's probably not worth it. It's funny though. I don't think we're a good Unwinding Clock deck. It's like kind of cute to be able to untap all your artifacts, and it's great with the One Ring, but I don't think we have many other tap artifacts that I really care about, right? And like, so then we would basically be playing that card for the One Ring in our deck, which is a little bit silly, I think. I think people might notice that I haven't talked about Walking Ballista. I don't know that we need a Walking Ballista. It's not like the worst outlet in the world. Yeah, I guess it's not too bad if we do the whole like surveil through our entire deck thing. Because there's a lot of ways to like make that actually work as an outlet. So maybe in worst case scenario too, right? You can always just play a Walking Ballista for 0. Yes, it'll die to state-based actions right away, but Golbez will still see that it tried to enter the battlefield. And well, I mean, it does successfully enter, it just dies immediately. So it will still technically successfully enter. So you do get a surveil off of it. So I guess it's kind of worth it. Not fantastically, but in enough situations where I guess we can't complain too hard. Seeing Sculpting Steel here means I probably want to play Copy Artifact, because our commander cares about artifacts entering, not their cast. So Copy Artifact's pretty good at that. Yeah, it doesn't look like there's anything much more that we need to really throw in here as far as that specific avenue of exploration is concerned. Yeah, and I guess the last thing I'd be thinking here is like, is there any other way to maybe give us some more card advantage, more mana advantage, something like that? You could potentially go into like a Mirror Maid to potentially copy someone's like Rhystic, Mystic. That's not a bad thing. There's also the copy artifact, like I mentioned, but let's give ourselves a flexible option here in Mirror Maid just to tide things off. And also, I want to double check that blue count because I remember we talked about that a little bit earlier, where I was a little concerned we wouldn't have enough. But you have 32 blue cards here. Probably means we can afford the Force of Negation, but we'll take a bit of time to think about how much interaction we can afford to have here. Last but not least, though, we got to finish up this mana base. A lot of those were mentioned on EDHREC, so I have no problem kind of going in here and just using this as a nice little cheat. Gemstones, Ancient Tomb, absolutely. All the fetch lands in the world. And remember, we are on Tainted Pact, right? So we can't have any copies of anything in our mana base here. So that's something important to think about. We'll probably want one of each basic just because you're in 2 colors. There's no need to like reinvent the wheel in this type of situation here. Dead Relic is in the sideboard. Forgot to put that in earlier. Otawara is obviously a massive staple of the format. City of Brass, we like all of our multicolored lands. Urza Saga is probably just so good in this deck. We kind of have to play it, even though it's a card I traditionally do not love. We are not playing Undercity Sewers. Our commander surveils. I'm not hearing any excuses about Undercity Sewers. The card is bad, and I'm super happy to not have an excuse to try and play it. Tapped land, probably not worth it. Sinking to Super is one I was definitely thinking about. I say we just play it. It's a counter spell, it's a bounce spell, it's a land. We love it. All the above, right? Minamo is great with our One Ring, really good with some of our other occasional synergies there. Gloomlake Verge is one that I've been a really big fan of lately. I like the Verge cycle a lot. People sleep on the Pathways too. I like these cards also equally as much. Academy Runes is one I definitely was thinking about. I don't know that we want quite that many colorless lands in the deck, but it's a thought. And then you could play more snow basics, right? If that was something you had a lot of concern about. I'm not super concerned about it, so we can probably afford to ship it. Spire of Industry is insane. This deck, we have so many artifacts, like we're good there. I don't want to go too crazy with MDFCs though, modal double face cards. They're definitely something to consider though, for sure. Honestly, Takanuma is probably pretty good in case we mill a creature that we did not want to mill. So I'm kind of down to use Takanuma to pick up some stuff if we drop it on accident. All right, with all that, how are we looking on lands? Let's go back to the top. Oh, we have 104. Great, fantastic. We have more lands than we can use. Great. I think, let's see, what's the best options here? Takanuma was the last ad. I'm not going to die over that hill. We didn't add any of the snow lands. Great. The fetches, I think, are just kind of important when you play a deck like this that cares about the top of your library, right? Quite a lot. So we can move the Pathway out. That one's probably on the cuter side of things. Let's see, what else? We can also probably get rid of the 5-color Pain lands because we're only in 2 colors, right? You don't necessarily need to have that type of perfect. But also, it is tough with the fetches because you don't want to run out of targets, but at the same time, clearing the top of your library is so important to what this deck is doing. I think we kind of need to, so let's be, I'd rather have a 5-color land than worry about not being able to cast our stuff with something like Gloomlake. So we'll move that out. And is Minamo maybe too cute? I guess Underground River is technically better than some of the Pain lands, right? But is Minamo too cute? What does it untap apart from the One Ring? Nothing else relevant, although Minamo plus the One Ring is a really good combination. So, a little bit, I guess it untaps Emery too, which is not trivial, right? So let's consider that. Spire of Industry, I guess, is just worse than Mana Confluence and City of Brass in this deck, even though it's, good for what this deck is doing. So move that to the sideboard. And then that's our land base. The last thing I want to have here is 100% like a definitive plan for when we mill our entire library, right? Or mill surveil through a portion of our library, right? With our commander. Like, how do we actually turn that, for example, if we Hullbreaker Loop, how do we turn that into a win, right? So you can get something like, for example, Aetherflux Reservoir into your graveyard, right? But how do we get it back is the big concern. And I think it's probably got to be something with flashback, I'm assuming, that will allow us to cast a spell from our graveyard. So let's look at the flashbacks real quick here. I think, honestly, without overcommitting to like a Dread Return plan, which is something I really don't want to do in this situation, Dread Return is a card that allows you to return target card from your graveyard to the battlefield, which is great, but the cost is sacrificing 3 creatures, right? So I'm not really a huge fan of that. And I'd really rather not be our solution in this place. Echo Vions is cool, right? But like that's not going to help fix anything. It's just going to time twister us in that spot. So that's probably not it either. I think Deep Analysis is probably just the right option here, because it just allows you to draw 2 cards, right? So the idea is you get to the point where you have the, oh yeah, but what if? Yeah, so I think you just mill until you get Deep Analysis is the idea, right? And then you just put whatever you want on top of your library, and then you win with whatever means. Either you put the Aetherflux on top of your library, or put the Thassa's Oracle and then mill through the rest of your deck. So I think Deep Analysis is just the call here, and then we'll find a little cut for it real quick. We'll probably cut down on one of these creatures just because there's a lot here. And I want to make sure we're not just overloading with a bunch of cute stuff. Size, probably the most cuttable card in the deck, even though it does give you the double surveil. So I'm down to get rid of that and then just have this be our 100 cards. So this is a Golbez list. I hope y'all enjoyed going through the brewing process with a deck like this, and trying something new out from our cool new Final Fantasy set. I'm very excited to potentially try and sleeve this up. I have MagicCon literally within a day, so we'll see if I end up in a situation in which I can actually go and sleeve this deck up in time. But it'd be fun to test and cool to see. It's all this the cool stuff's coming out of this set. I think this set is like one of the most legends of any set ever, and so it's really cool to see some real cool innovative stuff here. What do you all think about this deck? Is there any cards that I potentially missed that are maybe slam dunks in the deck? Let me know in the comments down below. And in the meantime, I'll catch you next time, everybody. Peace.